Okay, welcome back to the third video in this series about photosynthesis and how light is going to power our ecosystem. So in this one, we're going to take a close look at photosynthesis one more time and try and develop the idea of what role ATP has in this whole process. So our overall view of photosynthesis so far is that we take 6 carbon dioxides, 6 water molecules, and some light, and the plant is going to fuse them together to build up, using the light, to synthesize one glucose particle, a C6H12O6 particle, and 6 oxygen so that we can breathe as animals. We also took a slightly closer look when I talked about chloroplasts and chloroplasts having the chemical chlorophyll, which allowed the chloroplast to take this light that's coming in. So the chloroplast is going to take the light coming in right here, and it's going to take that light energy and rip apart 6 water particles. And the 6 water particles will get ripped apart into 12 hydrogen ions, which are charged hydrogens that have lost their electrons. The electrons, as we said earlier, are going to go into what's called the electron transport chain, and we'll let a bio teacher tell you all about that next year. But the 6 waters will also produce 3 oxygen molecules for us to breathe. Those 12 hydrogens down here are going to go from the light phase, so we'll call this our light phase of photosynthesis. The 12 hydrogens will come out of there and go down into the dark phase of photosynthesis. And in that phase, the 12 hydrogens will join up with 6 carbon dioxides to make a glucose, C6H12O6, and 3 more oxygens. So we wind up getting a total of 6 oxygens out at the other end. So if we wrote this, instead of writing it as carbon dioxide plus water plus light gives us glucose plus oxygen, we could say that there's actually 2 places to it. Part 1 is going to be, we'll take 6 waters plus light, and we're going to create 12 hydrogen ions and 3 oxygens, like so. And then in part 2, the dark phase, we're going to take those 12 hydrogen ions. Let's do this in blue. Our 12 hydrogens plus 6 carbon dioxides, and we are going to make one C6H12O6, one glucose molecule, and 3 more oxygen particles. So if we were to add all this up, we wind up saying that, oh look, we've got water, 6 of them, so 6 waters, plus 6 carbon dioxides, plus light. Wait, what about these guys? What about these 12? Well, that means I have to put these 12 hydrogen ions in, and they become glucose on the other side. But where did those originally come from? They originally came from the breaking down of the water. So what happens is, since this is a product and this was used up, they cancel each other out. They actually disappear in the chemical reaction. And you wind up with only C6H12O6 plus 6 O2s. So our light phase, the top one in red, rips apart the water and makes hydrogens that will eventually get torn up later, and it makes oxygen for us to breathe. In the dark phase, step number 2 in blue, we take those 12 hydrogens that we made in the beginning and we add them to carbon dioxide to make glucose and 3 more oxygens. So, but wait a minute, we said in the last video that matter is conserved. We've accounted for all of our atoms. All the carbons are there, hydrogens are there, oxygens are there. But it looks like the light disappears, because we've got this light is energy, and we got light in the beginning but no light at the end, no heat. Where'd the energy go? The energy is actually getting stored by creating the glucose and then eventually tearing the glucose apart, and it's also being stored in a molecule called ATP. And ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. Okay. So adenosine is going to be this thing that looks like a whole bunch of carbons and nitrogens put together, but we're going to say that it basically looks like this. It's a hexagon hooked to a pentagon, hooked to another pentagon. Like so. So there, this is my adenosine right here. And then tri means that there are 3 phosphates. So what I'll do is I'm going to attach a phosphate, which is a PO4, to another PO4, a second one, to another one, a third one. It is a triphosphate, where phosphates are the PO4 things. So adenosine triphosphate. And somehow this mixture right here of carbons and nitrogens and the 4 phosphates, the 4 phosphorus and 4 oxygen things that get stuck together, those 3 phosphate things store energy for a cell. And they can move throughout the cell, like inside you or inside a plant, and work muscles and work the process of actually burning food for an animal or a plant. So let's take a closer look at how that actually works. So we're going to start off at the top with our adenosine triphosphate. So I got my hexagon connected to a pentagon, connected to another pentagon, connected to 3 phosphates. PO4, PO4, PO4. And that contains a lot of energy. And what can happen here is that the cell can basically change that into an adenosine diphosphate. Now, di is a prefix that means 2. So we're going to go from 3 phosphates at the top to only 2 phosphates at the bottom. So we'll still have our adenosine, which is our hexagon, connected to a pentagon, connected to another pentagon of carbons, hydrogens, and nitrogens. But this time we're only going to have 2 phosphates. And we're going to call that ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates. So wait a minute, what happened in this process? When we went from 3 phosphates down to 2 phosphates, we must have lost a phosphate. So, oops. So a phosphate, a PO4, is going to fall off of our ATP. And in that process, we're going to get energy out. Okay, so your heart needs to beat, or the plant needs to work processes so that it can continue to live. Then what it will do is take the adenosine triphosphate, peel off a phosphorus or a phosphate ion group, and make ADP. But that seems like it would be a dead end there. How's the energy keep going? Well, if the sunlight keeps coming in, it will help to keep making adenosine triphosphate out of the diphosphate. Because what we need this to do is to be a cycle. And in this part of the cycle, we need sunlight to come in, or at least some kind of energy. So energy is going to enter. It could be from, say, in the photosynthesis process that the light energy is actually coming in, or it could be from burning food. But somehow energy has to come in, and we have to get that phosphate ion back. So a PO4 ion is going to join back onto the ADP so that it becomes a cycle. So you have ATP, which contains some energy. If the cell needs to use that energy, it peels off a PO4. So here we are, we're coming down and we're going to peel off a PO4. And that process of peeling off the PO4, the phosphate ion, gives the cell energy that it can use. And that, now we're left with this thing down here that only has 2 phosphates, called an adenosine diphosphate. And in order to recharge that, we have to put a PO4 back on and jam some energy into that process. So now we have a cycle again, a cycle of energy that keeps continuing inside a cell. One way you can think about this is like a rechargeable battery. So here is your fully charged battery with 3 phosphates. And when you use it, that battery starts to fall apart, making its own PO4 like chunks that fall off, and the energy gets used, just like you put a battery into your cell phone, and the energy is used by the cell phone, and pretty soon your cell phone is going dead. And what that means is that the cell phone will be like filled up with ADP. And what you would have to do is plug that thing back in, so you'd have to get energy to enter back into the cycle, and some of those PO4s that had fallen off have to join back in so that we recharge our battery. So basically we're changing the energy, we're cycling the energy by changing the chemicals. So just to review, we've got this energy cycle that's going on between ATP and ADP because of the fact that photosynthesis is occurring, and we need to store our light energy somewhere, and we're going to store that light energy in 2 spots: in the burning of the glucose, the C6H12O6, and in the creation and destruction of the adenosine triphosphate. So now we've seen that energy can come in through the sun, power a weather cycle, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, and this process called photosynthesis.